Hello and welcome to my terrible attempt at a guide to how to use a jump freighter. So what I'm going to talk about today is the basics on how to light a cyno for a jump freighter, jump to one at a station, dock up, etc., travel back to high sec. That'll be more or less the first part of the video, which will be a demonstration of a simple, very simple jump route, jumping to low sec and then going back to high sec. After that I will talk about the various ships that you would use to light cynos, so rookie ships, and then also how to fit interceptors in order to move your cynos to stations that you've maybe never been to before, and then how to get a rookie ship when you arrive there. After that I'll go into a lot of detail, a good amount of detail about how to light cynos very precisely on stations and some of the resources you can use, which may help you with doing that. And finally I'll just talk about how to plan out your jump routes and how to sort of manage your jump fatigue that you'll gain in the process and just what to look out for. So what you'll first see on the screen here is what is basically my setup for when I'm doing my jump freighting. So I have my main character in the bottom left tile here. My jump freighter will fill the second tile when it's not in use. I then have two other cyno alts which I use to move my jump freighter around. So I use IS Boxer for this, that should be fairly obvious from the window layout. But when I started I didn't, I just used alt tabbing. The reason I like IS Boxer is just because it helps manage my CPU a little bit better. It makes it very easy to manage the windows because I can then quickly look at different windows, and I also get a better situational awareness because I can see not very well, but well enough when something else might be going on in another screen. So the first thing I've done here is I'm actually fleeted up with the two cyno alts on the two tiles that I'm pointing at. What I'm going to do is just cover up the two tiles that are not in use so that you can keep focus on the jump freighter pilot and the cyno alt that are currently going to be used. So the route that I'm going to jump, and I'll just bring in Dotlan here. This is the Dotlan jump planner. The route that I'm going to jump is simply going from Minduri to Rahadalon, which is in low sec. So Minduri being our high sec staging for jump freighters. And then I'm going to do the return journey to Minduri by taking the gate from low sec to high sec. So this should give you a good demonstration of what the jump process would be like if you're going from station to station, which applies whether you're in low sec or null sec, or going from low to null and vice versa. And then it'll give you an idea of what you do when you're travelling back to high sec from the low sec border system. So this particular route is very short, which means it won't cost me very much money, which is quite nice. It is 0.7 light years, and it will use 851 oxygen isotopes. So I think before I do the jump I should just give a quick overview of what a jump freighter actually is. So a jump freighter is essentially a modified freighter. It's the Tech 2 version of each race's freighter, which has a reduced cargo capacity, but it can jump to cyno-zero fields. And cyno-zero fields are things which are lit by other pilots, which you can essentially lock onto and jump to. So you can jump with the maximum skills at a distance of up to 10 light years. So note that the distance is in light years and not in AU or in gate jumps or anything like that. It's a direct line in light years. And if I actually bring up the star map and do unflatten, I believe, you can see this massive sphere. That is essentially the range that I can jump in my jump freighter throughout New Eden. However, it's very awkward to actually use, but hopefully it demonstrates the sort of range that you would have with a jump freighter. So the Anshar is the Gallente freighter, which uses oxygen isotopes as its fuel. Now each race's freighter uses a different isotope which comes from mining ice. And I think that more or less covers what a jump freighter is. So it has about, this one with max cargo fit, which is these 3 cargo expanders, has about 340k meters cubed. It'll go up, that's with Gallente freighter 4. If I had 5 it would be a little bit bigger. So in my jump freighter I carry fuel in the fuel bay, which is built into the jump freighter, and it can carry 10,000 meters cubed of fuel. I usually carry some extra containers just with some bits and pieces that can be handy, so I carry my refits in a container just to keep them compartmentalised. In this case I have inertia stabs for max align time, and I have bulkheads for max tank, and then some extra fuel just in case I forget to refill wherever I'm going. I then carry some extra stuff, so in this case I carry Cyno Zero fields and liquid ozone, which are used for lighting cynos, and that's the fuel for them, the liquid ozone. The reason I do this is so that if I jump to a station that I've not been to before, I can drop some off, or if I'm going to a mid that's maybe low on ozone or Cyno Zero fields and they don't have any on the market there, then again I can drop some off at that station. So that's the jump freighter pilot. Now also in fleet with me are my two Cyno pilots, one of them which I'll be using for this demonstration hopefully. This one here is a Cyno pilot which I currently have in Rahadalon in a Minmatar Rookie ship. Now the nice thing about Rookie ships is you can get them for free, but you can also fit them to be a Cyno ship, which all you need to do is put a Cyno generator on and enough ozone to light the Cyno Zero field. Now I'll talk a little bit more about this when I talk about noob ships. Not noob ships, sorry, Cyno ships, which you will be using to actually light your Cynos to move your jump freighter around. So now that this sort of what each of the ships you need are out of the way hopefully, and just remember that these need to be in fleet together, I will just go through the steps to actually jump to a Cyno and demonstrate it for you. So the first thing I would do is undock my Cyno ship. Now the Rahadalon station is quite nice in that by hitting control in space I'll actually stop at a point that is more or less perfect for a Cyno to be lit. I will talk in a lot more detail later in the video about the perfect way to light a Cyno, but the gist of it is that you want, from the point that the Cyno is lit, so here, you want no more than a 5 kilometer sphere. You do not want that sphere to intersect the station structure. If you do, there's a chance that when you land you will bounce off the station, and that is not very good for your jump freighter. So let's take my freighter and undock him, because I want to undock him before I try jumping. When you undock you have a station change timer, and during that time frame you can't jump. So I want to take him, undock, control in space. That'll keep me within 0 of the undock that I'm jumping from. That's more important in low sec and null sec so that you can dock back up if there's trouble. But you'll see that the session change timer, which shows up here, is a circle that moves. That's gone, so I'm now prepared to jump. I can go back to my Cyno pilot and light the Cyno, and I can cycle it off, but it wouldn't matter. I don't have enough ozone for it to last longer than one cycle. Go back to my Cyno pilot, and then I can just simply, and I've probably screwed this up already, I can jump to my pilot. So I right click the capacitor and I go to jump to, and the pilot's name will show up behind the bit that you can't see, and in brackets the system that I'm jumping to, and by clicking that I will jump. And you'll notice immediately I use up 75% of my capacitor and I get another session change timer. The other thing to notice is that I've landed 5 kilometers away from the Cyno, and you will always land this far away, at least 5,000 meters away from the Cyno, and that will be important later when you think about Cyno positioning. You will land 5,000 away in a 5 kilometer sphere away from the Cyno. So now that my session change is over, I can dock up at the station I've just jumped to, and we have just made a nice successful jump into a low sec system. You'll notice that I have jump fatigue timer and I have a reactivation timer. Now that is very short because the distance was very short. The reactivation timer is a hard cap on when you can jump, and the fatigue timer is another timer that accumulates, and depending on how big this timer is, that affects how big your reactivation timer is, along with how far you jump. I'll talk about that in more detail later in the video when I look at jump routes and how to manage your jump fatigue. But now that that is over, I could make another jump, or in this case I'm going to go back to high sec. Now that timer doesn't affect your ability to jump back to high sec, it doesn't affect your ability to take gates. However, it does affect your ability to escape to an emergency Cyno. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncover my third Cyno, and I'm going to put him in position in this system so that he is in position to light a Cyno if required, so that I can bail with my jump freighter. So I already have a Cyno spot ready in this station. This station has an enormous undock radius anyway. It's the Gallente station from nullsec sovereignty space. And once he's in position, I will undock and I'll make the trip back to highsec. So now that I'm undocking, again I'm going to hit Control Space just to stop on the undock, just in case anything goes wrong while I find my bearings, and I'll find Mindori, which is the highsec station I want to jump to, and I will just click jump to jump through the gate. Now because there can't be any bubbles in low sec, I should be fairly safe. However, because of where I've let my Cyno in the undock, there's a chance that people could undock from this station and bump me off, or they could maybe arrive on grid because they've seen the Cyno and bump me, or they could just try and lock me up and kill me really fast. So all times I'm prepared to hit Control Space, stop my ship and then dock if needed. However, it looks like this should be no problem. The other problem that I've heard happening, although has never happened to me, is that when you warp to the gate, there's a chance that you may bump off another ship at the gate if it lands at just the right time, or if it's in just the right position. So you don't really want to leave this screen once you start the warp. You want to make sure you get back to highsec. The last thing that might happen is when you go through to highsec, there may be suicide gankers on the other side. From my experience, the system that we're going into isn't very well travelled, and there actually haven't been any, from what I can see, suicide ganks ever in this system according to ZKillboard. There have been 4 jump freighter deaths in the past year, which once we jump into the system I'll bring up on the screen, but they all appear to have been from either war targets, or the pilot being suspect, or the pilot having a kill right, or something that makes them a legal target and not a suicide gank target. So when I jump into the highsec, I'm usually fairly confident that I don't need to scout the other side, but if you're really paranoid, you could wait for your Okay, so that's us now back in highsec. Now I can just simply warp to the station and that's us basically safe. I'll just show you. This is the ZKillboard for Mindori. You can see that there have been 4 jump freighters. I don't want to click this and give away the people that have died. You can look that up yourself. It's not particularly difficult, but all I will say is that all 4 deaths were from people tackled by, looked like actual proteases, to be honest, in highsec, which aren't going to be used to gank. So that should give you some confidence that jumping into the highsec side you're not likely to get ganked just for a shiny kill mail. Obviously beware about carrying enormous payloads into highsec, because that might make you a target. And just as I say that, a catalyst lands, which is fairly ironic, but I think he's probably just on his way to low sec. And that's basically it for how you would jump to a station and then come back to low sec. So if you want to continue deeper into null sec or chain up more midpoints and jump further into the space, you would just do the same process as the first jump, where I jumped from station to station and docked up after the session timer. I can now dock up my escape Cyno because I don't need that. And that's basically the process that you would use to jump to a station and then dock up. So now I think I've covered most. Okay, so one thing I didn't point out is the Cyno's still lit, so I can show this here. There are more than one way to light a Cyno, so if I right click my capacitor you get the jump to. Oh, and then that's just failed anyway because you can see the pilot name, but who cares. So you can see jump to my character. Another way to do this would be to click in fleet and then right click the pilot's name and jump that way, or you can right click in the fleet window, so fleet chat or the fleet window. The final way that I know of would be to actually right click on the broadcast history if that person's name has been broadcast, and you can use jump to from there. And that's basically the gist of jumping to a station and then also returning to highsec. So now I think I should probably talk about the different ways that you would fit a ship to actually light Cynos, and then for travel scepters to light a Cyno. So if I bring up EveFit here, what I'm going to demonstrate is just the 4 different rookie ships that you can use to light Cynos, and then the pros and cons of each one, or the failure that is a MAR, basically. So, right now we have the 4 rookie ships, the Velator from Gallente, the Ibis from Caldari, the Reaper from Minmatar, and the Imperator from Amar. Now, the main thing about lighting a Cyno is that you need a Cyno Zero fuel generator and you need liquid ozone. Now, I'll take you back to another screen just now, but to light a Cyno requires 300 ozone, and 300 ozone is 120 meters cubed. So if we go back to EFT, we can see that in the noob ships, the Velator, the Ibis, and the Reaper can all hold 120 meters cubed as their base cargo, which means they can fit 300 ozone. However, the Imperator cannot. And now the amount of ozone that you need is affected by the Cyno Zero Field Theory skill. So if you want to actually make a noob ship Cyno, all you need is CPU management to 5, and then Cyno Zero Field Theory to 4. You can put some optional things in, like Infomorph Psychology to have jump clones, or propulsion jamming to web your freighter, for example, but really all you need are these skills here, which take about 10 days to train. So that probably explains why you get so many Cyno alts in Brave, the AWOX people, on a regular basis. But now that the skill point thing is gone, this used to be good because you could create an alpha clone. Now that the skill point requirement on clones went in, or the clone upgrades went with Rhea, you can add a whole lot more onto these pilots, and for example you can make them into Inti pilots. So all of the noob ships except the Amar one at base can hold the 300 ozone at 120 meters cubed. If you want it to work for the Amar one, you need to add a cargo hold. So it is workable if you already have an Amar alt. However, if you were making a character just to do Cynos, it's probably worth not making an Amar character for that reason. Now, just to have a look at what you can do with interceptors, in order to travel around nullsec, you want to be able to get through bubbles, and you don't want to get caught by gate camps. And you want to be able to get to a new station for the first time and drop off a Cyno and drop off ozone. So these are 2 fits. The one on the left is the Raptor. It has 3 inertia stabs, an optional micro warp drive, optional cloaking device, the Cyno Zero Field. Now it's been put in the high slot just for transport, and then it has 2 small cargo hold optimizations. This boosts the cargo bay up to be big enough to hold ozone. It does say a 2-second align time here, but if you look at it in something else like Pytha, I believe it's 1.96, so it just creeps under 2. So if the Raptor is your only option as a travel Inti, then it can work. However, if you want something a bit better and much easier to get under the align time of 2 seconds, you can use an Ares. And so here's an Ares with 2 inertia stabs, 2 nanofibers. You can just load that up with inertia stabs, I believe, but as long as you get under the 2-second align, that's all that matters. Same as the Raptor for every other slot, the cargo hold optimization puts over the 200 meters cubed requirement. And there you have 2 possible travel inties that you can use just to zip around nullsec and travel to various stations to drop off the Cynos. So what I think I'll do now is actually show you how you would do that. So what I'll talk about next is travelling from one station to another in nullsec with a travel inti that is fit to hold your Cyno and ozone, so you can go to a new station for the first time, and I'll also talk about how to get a noob ship out of that. So if we hop over to my main character, what you'll see is I'm in the Raptor fit because my main character can't actually fly the Ares. However, my 2 other Cyno alts that I now use can actually fly the Ares. I'm just going to quickly dock this guy up. Oh, a trick that you can use before I dock him up. When you're at the station, after you light the Cyno and it's cycling, you can't do anything for 10 minutes. You can't move anywhere, you can't warp. If you log the character off, it will remain in space until the cycle finishes, and then it will emergency warp. So it's still vulnerable even if you log off, but what you can do, because generally it's just the cost of doing business with these characters, is that they probably will die. You can set the station as the target destination, And then while the Cyno is running, if you click autopilot, it'll repeatedly try to dock until it eventually can. And so if I hit autopilot now, because I'm already within 0, it should basically dock immediately in the first tick that autopilot is activated. But back to the main point. So right now I'm on my main character in GE-TAC, and let's say I want to go light a Cyno in VTAC 3 on the station there. I already have some Cyno stuff there, but we'll ignore that for now. Let's imagine that I don't have anything in that station, and I just want to take my Cynoraptor over. So I have 300 ozone in the cargo bay, I have a Cyno in the high slot. That can be offline, it doesn't actually matter at this point, and I'm taking along this warp scrambler to show you later on how to actually light a Cyno accurately on a station. So let's undock and head over to VTAC 3. Now, as I'm travelling there, in nullsec there's 4 possible stations that you can, in sovereignty nullsec, sorry, there's 4 possible stations that you can light a Cyno at. For the 4 different races. Now, the only one you really want to avoid is Caldari. It's easy enough to Cyno onto the station, but it's not very easy to get out of the station because it is a kick out, and that means that as soon as you undock, you will leave the docking radius of the station, and that is also true for a jump freighter. You will just and no more leave the docking radius. So if someone bubbles you when you're just off the dock, just off the undock, then you could have a very bad day and lose a nice shiny 7 billion jump freighter, which is not very much fun for anyone. So that's just something to bear in mind. So what I'm going to do is, oh, I thought I had Instadock, okay. So I'm going to warp to the VTAC 3 station and dock up, and then I'm going to show you how to get a noob ship when you already have a ship in the station. I'll remove that for now because I'll be using it for demonstration purposes later on, and that one.
Docking permission requested. Docking request accepted.
Okay, so once you're in the station and you've travelled where you want to go, you can drop the ozone off and you can unfit the Cyno and you can leave the ship. So now what I already had some Cyno and ozone here because I've used the station previously, but now you have the Cyno 0 field and the ozone from the Raptor that you can then fit to a noob ship. But how do you get to the noob ship? So if you undock, because there's already a ship in the station, if you dock it won't give you the free rookie ship, the free Ibis in this case. But a way around that is to create a contract to one of your alts. So if I create an item exchange to the guy whose name I failed to OPSEC, you will be able to get a noob ship. And the reason that this works is because by creating the contract it's no longer in your inventory, in your hangar. So now if I undock and redock, it will give me an Ibis. And then you can cancel the contract and get the interceptor back. So I'll quickly undock and then dock back up when my session change is finished. So I stop my pod on the undock, and then I'll dock back up. And you see I get my Ibis, and I'm going to make that active and then equip the stuff. So I can stick on that, and I can stick the ozone in the cargo. So that's you got the noob ship. Now just for the purposes of this video I'm going to use the interceptor just to demonstrate how to actually produce the Cyno spot, just because it's a little bit quicker. So if I open my contracts and delete the contract, I have my Raptor back. Okay, so I've generally in the past been quite lazy about how I set up my Cynos, but I will, for this video, I'll describe how to do it very, very accurately if you wish to do so. I would recommend doing it this way, or following a guide which I'll point out in a second. Okay, let's hope I don't die while I show this. So this is a guide. I can't remember who it was written by, but it's got information on most of the station models in the game, so this will be quite useful if you happen to be in LowSec or NPC nullsec and jumping there. And it basically shows you a position on most of the stations in the game, which you can light a cyno at, and it's a good reference material if you're not sure about a good place to start. And what it shows you is that there's a range of different docking radiuses. So for example, this hub is what they would describe as yellow or medium, and it's got a docking range of 15 kilometers. There are green ones with much larger docking radiuses, and there are red ones with very, very short docking radiuses, so you need to be careful. So this one has a docking range of 2 kilometers. So that basically means it's impossible to guarantee that when you jump to the cyno on that station that you won't either bump or land outside the docking radius. So I mentioned before that when you light a cyno, you will land 5 kilometers away from the point the cyno is lit, and you do not want to land on top of or inside of a station, because then you'll get thrown out. If you've ever warped to a sun bookmark where you're inside the sun and get launched, that's sort of what will happen with your freighter, and it can very quickly send you outside the docking radius of the station. So what I'm doing now is the center point in the station from which the docking radius starts is on the station bracket. So you can see here that it's sort of towards the center of the station. And what you want to try and do when you light a cyno is get as close to that bracket as possible, basically without your jump freighter landing on top of the station structure. So what I'm going to do right now is, just to demonstrate something, and it'll become obvious in a moment, is save this station location. I'll just call that 0 just now. But what you'll see is that's actually 5 kilometers away from me in the station structure. I'm within the docking radius right now, and I'm getting as close to the bracket more or less as I can. So this seems like a rough spot where I might want to light a cyno. However, if I was to light it right now, there's parts within this sphere, where the 5 kilometer sphere, where I would definitely land on the station. But what you also need to account for is that a jump freighter isn't infinitely small, so it's maybe like 2 to 3 kilometers across. So I've brought this module along to give you a sphere to kind of judge where you want the absolute maximum edge to be that your jump freighter could land. As long as this sphere doesn't touch the station structure, you should in theory never bump off the station. However, you also want to make sure that when you jump in, you will land inside the docking radius at the same time. So in order to find the edge of the docking radius, there's a little trick you can do. So if I just get directly over the station bracket if I can, and right click, so I'm using the radial menu, but you can either radial menu or right click the station and do approach. What you'll actually do is, rather than go towards the structure, you'll move to the edge of the docking radius. And you should see here that when that starts to change and be positive, my ship will spin round and I'll stop. And this is how you can find the docking radius on any station, is basically just hit approach on the station and you'll start moving to the edge of the docking radius. So what I'm doing is I've used my bookmark shortcut, which is Control and B, and I'm just going to save the docking radius when I get to it. So now that my ship's stopped, that's me basically at the docking radius, and I've saved that bookmark. So now, if you think about your geometry, that is the furthest point I want my ship to land. So between this bookmark and the station bracket, that is the furthest I want my ship to possibly land when I jump in, which means that I want my cyno spot to be at least 5 kilometers towards the station, or towards that bracket. So what I'm going to do is double click in space, and I'll start moving towards the other bracket. And when that gets to 5 kilometers, at least 5 kilometers, yep, so that means that if I were to jump here, I will have at least a 1 kilometer gap that my jump freighter could land. If it lands in the worst possible case scenario towards that edge of the docking radius, I'm safe. And if I look at this, which is the sphere where essentially the sphere from which my freighter could bump, I suppose I might bump off of this antenna, although I think that would probably be okay. But if I'm worried about that, I could essentially just move a little bit further back and down that way. And as long as this doesn't touch structure, and as long as that bookmark is more than 5 kilometers away, I will never ever be out of the docking radius when I land, and I should not bump off the station. And that is how you can light a perfect, or find a perfect cyno spot. And I'll also link the thread in Reddit which also describes that method. So for some stations that have a slightly smaller docking radius, you may need to be a bit tighter, so maybe 5.1 kilometers, and I don't know, maybe have that where it's just scraping the station structure and you should be fine. Now, something to watch in this station actually is we've found out that the V3 dock radius is about 18 kilometers in radius, so you can see that that's 12 away and that's 6, so 18 in total. If you go 18 out from this, that's, well, somewhere here, so a straight line down, which means that if you were to try and light a cyno here, then the 5 kilometers would be further away than the 20, and you're probably going to die because you'll end up outside the docking radius. And that's more or less it for how to light a cyno. You can apply that methodology to any station in the game. As far as nullsec stations go, the only one to worry about is Caldari. The Gallente, or Sov null station, sorry, the Gallente one is an enormous docking radius. It's like 40 kilometers or something stupid. The Amar one, like I just demonstrated there, it has quite a lot of leeway as long as you go above or below the station. I tend to go above, I've never lit one below. I just find it easier to get orientated above the station. The Minmatar one, the best place is actually more or less as soon as you undock you can hit control and space and stop your ship. That should be a pretty good cyno spot, but you want to confirm using the methodology I just described. And the Gallente one is awful, so just don't use Gallente stations if you can avoid it. So that's more or less everything I want to talk about how to light a cyno. The last thing I'll talk about now is just route planning. So the tool that I showed earlier on was .lan, and it helps if I find the correct route. Okay, so what I've got here, and I'll just delete this out. This is the .lan jump planner. You can, if you say you want to go from Indori to GE, you can just type them in here. And then you can enter the ship type you're using, so in my case an Anshar, but you can use any jump capable ship. Set jump drive calibration, I have the max. Fuel and freighter are just so that it can work out the amount of isotopes you're going to need. I'll uncheck that for now just so I can point something out, and then you can click go, and what it'll do is it'll try and work out the most direct route possible that you can jump from system to system. Now this is interesting because it's one midpoint, and you might think, oh, you can use one midpoint to get to GE with the new jump range changes. However, UQ-TAC does not have a station. It's also not owned by Hero anyway. So you can see that it doesn't have a station, which the other systems do. You can click this and select an alternative system, but it still tries to pick one in the middle that will allow a one jump route, and none of those have stations that we can use. So what you can come down and do is click Prefer Station Systems and hit Go, and that'll provide an alternative route. Now the problem is this has suggested a route that includes Providence, and we can't dock in Providence, at least I would not risk it personally. But what you can do is use Avoid System Region and type in Providence with all caps. And if I hit go again, it should give me an alternative route. Now it suggested ERVK, which is in catch. That's a good start. However, that is part of the Northern Pipe, which is owned by the Providence guys. So what you can start doing is entering every system one by one. I'll just do one as demonstration. And that'll eventually give you a route that only uses systems that you can dock at. I believe you can actually put in API information and use that for standings, but I don't know that I'd bother with that personally. You can continue adding to the avoidance system list until you come up with an appropriate route, but here's an example for your reference as an appropriate route, one I prepared earlier. This is quite a nice route which uses only hero-owned stations in space. And it's particularly nice because ETAC-Y is a Gallente station, GTAC-7 is Minmatar, which is very easy to quickly Cyno at, and GTAC is again Gallente, so it's a nice route to follow. You'll see it's about 20 light years and about 23,000 oxygen isotopes at max skills, so that's quite nice. I mean, so it's very straightforward to plan a route if you use the Dotlan jump planner. The last thing you want to be concerned with is your fatigue levels. So there's a really nice application that was made by a brave IT guy, which you can put in all the distances and it'll tell you what your fatigue and stuff is going to be. So what I've done is I've generated the typical route that I would follow if I'm going GETAC and then back to Rahadalon. So that would be Mindori, ETAC-Y, G7, blah blah blah, with the return trip being to Rahadalon and then going from Rahadalon to Mindori via the gate like I demonstrated at the start of the video. So what I've done is I've taken all these values for each jump and I've plugged them into this calculator. So the jump distances here should match more or less, it's not exact, but match the jump distances here. And what that tells me is if I jump without waiting, in other words, as long as if I jump every time my red timer goes to 0, I will end up with 2 hours and 20 minutes of fatigue by the end, but it will only take me 15 minutes to do a round trip. So that's a trade-off, where if you want to do one round trip at the end of the day and then go to your bed, then you can just blitz it in 15 minutes. But say you want to do it at a slow pace where your fatigue never gets high, or it always stays as low as it possibly can be. So you can put in the wait period here, and that will change all these timers to be appropriate. So after the jump I'll have that much fatigue, and then after I wait till the fatigue goes down to 10 minutes I'll have that much, and so on, and that'll take me just over half an hour, so just a little bit more than twice as long. However, I could then go straight back to doing another route doing the same method, or I could then blitz another route, so all in it would take me less than an hour to do 2 round trips and I'd be left with just over 2 hours of fatigue. So that's one way to do it. So what you might also want to do is you might want to do half of the route, and then before you start your return trip you are going to wait 25 minutes because you're doing other stuff once you land. So you'd maybe set this timer to 25 minutes, and that means you'll end up with like 40 minutes of fatigue, but you've spent that 25 minutes productively because you've maybe unloaded a lot of stuff that you want to sell, or you maybe unloaded stuff that you want to use for industry jobs, that sort of thing. So the message I want to leave with that really is that for the jump fatigue, you don't ever want there isn't a perfect way to do it. It's really situational. There is the fastest way possible, and there is an optimal fatigue level, but there's stuff in between that might suit you. Using this calculator is a good way to play with the numbers and actually figure out what's going to suit your particular route at any given time. I think that's more or less everything I wanted to talk about. The only thing I'd mention that I think I kind of skipped was that since Phoebe, you can no longer death clone your Cyno pilots around space where we have offices. So that is why I now use the Inti pilots, like I mentioned, EFT, because you can fly them from station to station and then set your clone there and use the trick I mentioned earlier on in the video. So I hope that was useful. If you have any questions about jump freighter stuff, please just ask around in things like the Brave Hauling channel, or try and ask me directly, and that's Bizarre Rising, and I'm sure you'll be able to find my name in Brave at some point in time. So jump safely, guys.